Okay, it is now 1 p.m. We will call to order this meeting of the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board for Thursday, January 21, 2021. This meeting will be conducted via Zoom video conference. It is originating, well, the chair and executive director are in San Diego. Most staff and other members are spread out around the state, particularly in Sacramento. So anyone watching, I want to welcome you to the meeting. And we'll begin with a roll call of members. The chair is present. Vice Chair Reeves.
Present.
Member Eng.
Present.
Member Allen. Here. Member Kent Monning.
Present.
Let the minutes for this month show that all members are present. Now we'll move on to approval of the minutes of our December 16th, 2020 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Member Eng. We'll have a roll call vote. The chair votes aye. Vice Chair Reeves.
Aye.
Member Eng.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Kent Monning.
Aye.
Thank you. Show the minutes being approved from the December 16th, 2020 meeting. Chair has a very brief report. First of all, want to explain to those who may be new to this, watching for the first time. This will be a relatively short meeting, about less than an hour probably of open session, although I do want to remind our members we do have a closed session item we'll recess to later in the agenda today. But in addition to the time spent in these meetings, most of the board work, the vast majority of the board work, is done between meetings. And since our last board meeting, our board members have resolved 722 appellate cases. So I want to thank the board for their hard work on all those cases. The board and staff, the AO judges, done a lot of work considering this is over the holiday season. So we appreciate that, and I'm sure our parties appreciate the fact that they will get speedy disposition of their cases. Yesterday was the inauguration, of course, and hopefully you all had a chance to see part of it and enjoy that. There'll be a lot of confirmations coming up on the federal level. We have two very important confirmations coming up on the state level, and those are for Member Allen and Member Kent Monning. Both are up for confirmation. I believe it is next Thursday, the 28th. I'm sorry, 28th. Yes, that's correct. So good luck on those. I'm sure you'll have no problem. And no additional items for the chair to report. We'll move now to the other board members. Vice Chair Reeves, any report?
No, sir, I don't.
Thank you. Member Eng.
No report from me, sir.
Member Allen.
Well, we're all working hard on our cases, and I would just say that we all recognize the effort and everything that goes into working under these very challenging circumstances. And I know the board shares my thoughts in terms of appreciating all levels of our staff who help us each month to rise to the challenge.
Thank you, Michael. Member Kent Monning.
Thank you, Chair Bach. No report, just my ongoing appreciation, as Member Allen said, and specifically to those who continue to go into our different field offices. We recognize everything that you're doing and truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. Now we move to item 5 on our agenda, which is an opportunity for members of the public to comment. Before I talk about the restrictions on public comment, I'd like to hear if there are any members of the public waiting to speak. Jeff, do we have any members waiting?
Chair Block, I have no hands raised for public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll move on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is a report by our Executive Director, Chief Judge Mike Cutri. Mike?
Thank you, Chair Block. Good afternoon, board members. First, I'll go through the workload and key performance numbers for field operations, and then I'll brief you on some of the challenges and solutions we've faced since the last report. December was the 4th consecutive month where appeal transmittals were more than double the pre-pandemic levels, and that being last March was our last normal month. As a reminder, this trend started when EDD closed to new claims for 2 weeks at the end of September to process its backlog. So this resulted in a large open UI balance heading into December that was nearly triple that when we were heading into September. Despite a sustained case production increase, the field has been unable to keep up, resulting in a decrease of all timeliness criteria as measured by the Department of Labor. We've had to focus on the oldest cases that we can hear so as not to further delay the claims process. So to summarize those numbers, DOL requires that we close 60% of cases within 30 days. December fell to a low of 14.5%, bringing our annual average evaluation year to 56%. The 80% mark for 45-day closure was low at 38.5%, bringing our yearly average to 79.9%, and our average case age grew to 63 days. So for a bit of context, which I think is important, this is clearly a problem across the nation in all UI appeals departments. California, by far, has the largest number of appeal workload in the nation. The last published figures from the Department of Labor were from November. They're always a couple months behind. But for reference, at that time, the nation was only meeting 30-day time lapse by 16% and 45-day by 29%. And those numbers are expected to fall once December is included. So we sit very much in the middle of the pack as a nation in appeals workload. Quite simply, the appeals departments nationwide are overwhelmed. So if there is a silver lining, and I believe that it is, it's that the overnight appeals have finally reduced to a level that we have not seen since September. So that means that our multiple efforts to catch up finally have a chance to gain some ground. We continue to address the backlog with a number of strategies. Last year, we brought on 22 new judges and 20 new support staff. We're all working in full at this time. More retired judges continue to seek to rejoin us, and we welcome them back to help with this crisis. They're working as much as possible. We have 9 new judges who started training a week and a half ago, and 6 more will start next month. And on top of that, we closed a recruitment last week for 20 new judges, and interviews will start shortly. Due to health and safety concerns, we can't do the traditional team calendars, which was a usual method to bring the judges into the office and to hear cases on an expedited basis. Instead, all judges have been hearing an elevated caseload, and many have volunteered to go above and beyond that. The presiding judges continue to hear large numbers of cases in addition to their regular duties, and which is much appreciated. Concerning the pandemic, compounding the problems with the heavy workload, we had several closures since the last report. We closed Oxnard, Orange County, and Inglewood for cleaning. And although these are always setbacks to our production, thanks to the supervisors, staff, and judges in those offices, interruption to public service was extremely limited. A huge thank you is due to our administrative services staff for ensuring prompt cleaning and coordination of those efforts. On average, we get the offices back open very quickly, just within a couple of days, cleaned, and all of our employees have returned safely to the workplace, thankfully. Despite our best efforts to move our staff to telework, we currently have about half of our employees doing so. We still operate in a largely paper system. So these office closures continue to represent a substantial logistics problem in processing our work. Lastly, with regard to security, the agency had 2 specific threats to our staff or facilities since the last report. CHP is involved in both, and both are considered stable at the moment. I will note that we have seen a marked increase in abusive and harassing callers to our staff, often from parties who are don't have any business with our agency at present. So I'd like to thank our staff for their continued patience and professionalism in this difficult time. We understand that the public is frustrated, and we remain accessible to them to answer their questions to the extent we can. That concludes my report for January, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike, for the good information and for the great work you and staff have been doing in tough times. We'll move now to Vice Chair Reeves. Any questions or comments?
I just have a brief comment, Mike. I want to applaud you for the speed by which you're onboarding and hiring these ALJs to help support our efforts. I know it's incredibly difficult. I also want to thank the staff for the difficult circumstances in which they're working. I think in the long term, obviously, digitizing our records and evidence is going to be critical for us, but I think first things first, we've got to get through this crisis. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Vice Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Dan. Member Eng.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Cutri. I wanted to thank you for, again, the briefing prior to the meetings and for clarifying that the bulk of the timeliness challenges really are outside our purview, and I think that's important to note. And also thank you for clarifying that the lost wage assistance decisions will reflect a dollar amount that are not up to the $100 requirement. Appreciate that. I did have a question for you. As you know, as a matter of general inquiry from the public that I've received and are in the news media about the number of potentially fraudulent claims, and I wanted to know if our agency has a specialized program for that, or are we depending primarily on EDD prior to the cases reaching us? These are those claims, of course, filed by individuals that have a suspicious identity and obviously false claims to benefits.
Yes, our judges are used to dealing with the evidentiary standards in these cases and lines of inquiry towards ferreting out fraud. Unfortunately, fraud in the UI system is ever persistent, and even in slow times. Unfortunately, as we've seen communicated from EDD, especially in the news media, it has reached new levels during this crisis. So we have a number of internal measures that we use to investigate cases on our own. EDD is the actual investigative agency, but we have certain measures that we look for when we calendar our cases. And then the department has become more involved in transmitting information to us that will open up lines of inquiry during a hearing. And we also have a system in place whereby if we can't establish the identity of a claimant, we will refer back to the department because it is modernizing its detection approaches, and it is the appropriate agency to do that. So the answer is yes, we are working very diligently on that issue, and we are aware that it exists.
Thank you. It's good to know that we have our own independent apparatus for doing that. Thank you. No further questions, Chair Block.
Right.
Thank you, Mike. Member Allen.
Yeah, I just want to thank the Chief Judge Cutri because I feel that he's very good about not only giving us good briefings here when we have our formal board meetings, but I feel like we have frequent contact in real time when issues arise. And he's also been very helpful to me when I have questions or specific concerns. So I just want to thank him publicly for being on the job and really being attentive to when we have questions, answering them. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Member Allen.
Thank you, Michael. Member Ken Money.
No specific questions, just thank you, Mike, for the detailed update and for everything that you're managing every day with new things coming up. I'm glad to have you at the helm. And like Member Allen said, the lines of communication are really helpful, and ongoing discussions when we have questions for you. Really appreciate your availability. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Moving on now to Jodi Remke, our presiding administrative law judge for appellate branch. Jodi?
Good afternoon, Chair Block and board members. I'm going to be going over the December 2020 performance indicators in your packet of information and focusing on the DOL guidelines. And as you can see, the goal or the requirement of completing cases in 45 days or less, in the guideline being 50%, we are year to date at 41%. Fortunately, we reached 95.9% for the month. So as you can see, we are slowly improving that number. If you recall, that is up the 41% from a 2-year low back in June, which we are at 6.4%. So despite our continuing to almost hit that 90% on a monthly basis, we're just slowly creeping up at 41% now. And again, not being a mathematician, I'm sure that if we continue to hit 90%, we should just make, the 50% by the end of the year. So that's our goal. Of course, with the increased number of cases in the field, anything can happen. Fortunately, right now, our number of appeals has not spiked like the field is experiencing. I would just also point out under pending cases, case aging, we are at 28.1% right now, and that is up from last month, which was 23. Unfortunately, although our number of overall cases hasn't increased, the times we're getting appeals have been slightly delayed due to the, unbelievable busyness at the field level. They just can't get the appeals to us fast enough. So fortunately, Chief Cutri came up with a slight change in processing over the last month and has asked the field to send all appeals directly to appellate operations so that we can scan and start the registration process instead of waiting for them to get to it, because they've got not only their cases, they've got to handle that processing part. So we are now doing the processing, and for the most part, we can process those appeals within 24 hours and get them registered. So hopefully that overall case aging will start to be reduced too, and we can get some of those cases going as quickly as possible. So I think that was a positive decision by Chief Cutri. And then I would just state again, as I've already kind of mentioned, the balance of open cases still fairly low, considering the average over the year and our high of 1,500 back in May. So again, we have not experienced the spike yet, and we'll just have to wait and see, but I think we're prepared if we do start to get a higher number. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi. Questions or comments for Jodi Remke? First, we'll start with Vice Chair Reeves.
I don't. Thank you, Jodi.
Thank you, Dan. Member Eng.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report, Chief Judge Remke. And also, I do agree with you. I'm not a math major either, but it looks like there's significant progress being made. I also wanted to thank you for the issue again that I mentioned earlier to Chief Cutri, the issue of the decisions reflecting the specific dollar amount for lost wage assistance. The formula, as you know, can be quite complex, and I think it's transparency and trying to provide as much assistance to the claimants as possible. So I do appreciate that. I have nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Member Allen.
Jodi, I have no questions for you. Only my thanks for your very good work and your availability when we have issues that we need further information on. So thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Michael. Member Kenmani.
Member Allen said exactly what I was going to say. Thank you for the detailed update. I'm pleased to learn about Chief Cutri and your work together to try something new to expedite the registration process. That sounds like a great idea. And thanks for always being available for my many questions.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. No other comments for Presiding Judge Remke. We'll move on to number 8 on our agenda, a report from our Chief Information Officer, Jeff Willoughby. Jefferson.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair Block and members of the board. Just a brief update on our appeals modernization project this month. Our focus since our last meeting has been on refining the field operations, including the receipt of information from EDD, getting those appeal files into the new system, and scheduling of hearings. So our next area of focus is going to be on holding a hearing proper, and that's going to represent a really big milestone in this project. So I look forward to reporting good news to you at our next meeting. I typically reserve a moment to thank the subject matter expert group that's involved with the modernization project, and I'll continue to do so this month. They work very hard to test every element of the system as it comes together to make sure that we have a successful launch of this. And I'd also like to commend really the entire organization's capability to manage what has been tremendous change. Whether, over the course of this year, it's been just so significant. This new system is going to represent another really major transformative change in the organization. And it may seem like we just keep on piling it on, but it really will benefit the organization over time. And I want to thank everyone here at CUIAB for their input and their support. and remind folks that we're trying to keep everyone updated through periodic emails and Teams messaging. And we're happy to take any input or any questions that anyone has about the new system really at any time. So I just want to thank the organization as a whole. More change is on its way. So we appreciate your forbearance in that. And that's my report for this month. Take any questions.
Thank you, Jefferson. Comments or questions? We'll begin with Vice Chair Reeves.
I don't. Thank you, Jefferson.
Thank you, Dan. Member Eng.
Nothing from me. Thank you, Jefferson.
Thank you, Mike. Member Allen.
Yes, Jefferson. You know, I'm glad of the fact that I don't have to call technical support all that often, but I did have a problem recently, and the staff was great in resolving it. And I was just wondering, in terms, because a lot of us now, we do our work remotely out of necessity. With the laptops and folks who are working remotely, my problems were a lot due to not having the upgrades necessary to mesh with all my other programs. And I was just wondering if there's a periodic review of all the remote computers in terms of the laptops or whatever is being used to make them synced up with the latest software. That was my question.
So there should be, yes, absolutely. And when you connect to the network, that analysis should be taking place. And if it's not, we can take a specific look at your machine. If we haven't already, it sounds like we've addressed your issue.
No, you have it addressed. It just occurred to me it might be to others. And also, I'm enjoying fishing now, the fishing expeditions where we can catch the the messages that shouldn't be coming through.
They are pervasive. They're very sophisticated, and they're becoming more and more believable at every turn. So if you think it has even a hint of maybe not being a legitimate sender, feel free to hit the phishing button. We'll analyze it in the security office, and if it's legitimate, we'll send it back to you, and if not, we will block that sender. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Michael. Moving on now to Member Kent Monning.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to say the updates that you all are providing with some of the details, I think, is just the best way to get everybody used to this idea as we move forward in the months, and having those specific examples of what benefits the system update will bring. We feel excited and looking forward to it, and I'm hopeful that sharing those details across the agency results with that sort of receptive response as well. So thank you for taking the time to do that, because I think sharing those updates are a crucial piece of this.
Agreed. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. If that's all for Jefferson, we'll move on now to our Chief Administrative Services Officer, Rob Silva. Rob?
Good afternoon, Chair Block and board members. I have a brief update surrounding staffing and a couple of budget issues. I'll begin with echoing what Chief Cutri already had said about the new administrative law judges coming in. We had 9 engaged in training recently. We also have 4 additional that have start dates, and we're hoping to get the start dates of the remaining 2 from that recruitment at any moment. So they'll be ready to begin the training in February. And at the last board meeting, we talked about engaging in another administrative law judge recruitment, and that one did close 5 days ago, the final filing date for what we hope will be 20 additional ALJs. And as Chief Cutri mentioned, we're going through the application review process with those. I also reported during last board meeting that we hope to get 3 more retired annuitant ALJs in. We did get those 3. They're on our roster as we speak. We also have a 4th retired annuitant working for us, which is kind of a push because she retired in December and came back in January as a retired annuitant. With regard to support staff, since the last time we met, we've had 10 new support staff positions filled, as well as 2 support staff retired annuitant positions. I know you've probably been seeing a slew of announcements for support staff recruitments, and I think we currently have over 25 support staff positions pending in either the advertisement, the selection, or the name clearance process. Included in that group are new positions, but also backfills of positions vacated through promotion. And then also there was the addition of some seasonal clerks. After the last board meeting, some offices requested seasonal clerk assistance, so we were also advertising for that classification as well to assist with the incoming workload. A quick update on overtime. The last time I provided an overtime report to the board was when we had data through October of 2020. At that time, we were averaging 1,270 hours a month of overtime and a monthly expenditure of $47,000. With the early tier of support staff hiring not resulting in a lot of new employees because it really provided advancement opportunity again for current employees. At the same time that was happening, the incoming workload, as Chief Cutri mentioned, was increasing. So the field really saw a significant increase in overtime in both the months of November and December of 2020. So as we sit at the halfway point of the current fiscal year, we're now averaging just over 1,600 hours of overtime per month and an average monthly expenditure of $62,000. With so many new employees expected to arrive mostly in February, we hope to see the overtime expenditures have a downward trend over the last quarter of the fiscal year. And then a quick budget update I wanted to provide. It's that time of year again where I apologize, but my spouse's dog is barking in the background. When she barks, she's my spouse's dog. But we're rolling out the call letters to all 18 cost centers within the CUIAB. Valerie Graziano on the admin staff and I've been working on the budget call letters for both the personnel side of things and the operating expenses and equipment. We expect to release those to the office next week. So that will give offices the month of January. It'll provide them the opportunity to give input and submit budget requests for state fiscal year 2021-22. As an added component to this year's process, we'll be asking offices to pay extra attention to the social distancing capabilities within their offices. I believe we've addressed these concerns with each field office, but just in case they don't already have the adequate installations or pending installations in place, we want them to really address their offices to make sure that they can continue to social distance as we all chase this vaccine. And getting that information back by the end of February, we'll be able to then address it in the current fiscal year, along with any other outstanding items that we will be able to purchase in the current fiscal year that we'll need for the 2021-22 fiscal year and moving on. And that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have questions or comments for Rob Silva? We'll begin with Vice Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rob, I'd like to repeat what I said to Michael, which is thank you so much for the speed and efficiency by which you've onboarded these new ALJs, and then also with the recruitment side of this, which I know is a challenge. I have just one question, and that is, have the PJs in the various field offices, have they provided you an assessment of COVID social distancing within the office? I would imagine that some of the offices are configured in a way that might make that a challenge. And I'm curious as to how that's been addressed in each of the field offices.
Yes, thank you. So we initially back in April, we reached out to all offices, the presiding judges and the legal support supervisors, asking them if they needed anything anything additional added to their office to social distance. They all reported back that they were able, for the most part, to create a social distancing atmosphere in their office with the staff. There were, at the time, there were 2 offices that requested plexiglass barriers, and we ordered them immediately. A couple of months after that, 3 more offices made similar requests of plexi separator configurations that have either been installed or are currently on order to be installed. So yes, we asked them to assess their offices they did, and we've been in constant communication about that. But again, this call letter process is just one more last stab in case something was missed, and we'd like to ensure that we can continue to socially distance.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Member Eng.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your report, Chief Silva. It's always very informative. I just had a question following up on the last two meetings. Thank you again for doing the language access survey, and I just wanted to know if CalHR has weighed in yet on its sufficiency.
They have not. So I will make a note to reach out to whomever we can within CalHR to get an update as to when they're going to respond to us.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Member Allen.
Yeah, hi, Rob. I have a couple of questions for you. So
Okay.
With our field offices, where when people are required to come in and they're working in the offices, is there a requirement that they mask up at all times, or is that dealt with just by through social distancing?
Yeah, when traveling in shared areas, they are to be masked up, as you put it, wearing face coverings. When eating or drinking, obviously they're not required to, but they are required to socially distance while they're eating or drinking. For instance, on a break, lunch, etc. And if they're in a private area working by themselves, far away from others, they're not required to wear the face covering.
Does an agency provide the masks that they use?
Yes, obviously people can bring in their own. We have been purchasing masks for, as well as other PPE for each office. And there's also the opportunity for offices since about April, and it's still ongoing, that if for some reason their orders, because initially when we started this process, PPE was on back order everywhere. Now suppliers have obviously caught up and it's not as much of an issue, but it's still an ongoing opportunity for employees to be able to purchase cleaning supplies or PPE for the office and then get reimbursed by the state.
Does the California Public Health Department or the epidemiologists specify a particular type of mask?
Yeah, the Cal OSHA has some information about what types of masks are to be worn. So we purchase masks based on Cal OSHA guidance.
That's what I was asking. And then I have a question regarding your overtime report. I want to make sure I'm understanding it properly. Is my assumption correct? Because I'm always wary about assumptions. I want to check this out. Are administrative law judges, are they considered non-exempt, or are they considered exempt from FLSA?
Yeah, with regard to overtime, administrative law judges do not work overtime.
Okay, they're exempt. So when you speak of the overtime, we're talking about our non-exempt people who are covered by FLSA, correct?
Yes, the support staff in field operations, as well as their legal support supervisor classifications, both the LSS2 and LSS1 can work overtime as well.
Thank you. That's my questions.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Moving on to member Ken Money.
Thank you so much, Rob. I want to recognize the tremendous amounts of work that it takes to continue to hire and build what we need with the numbers that we're seeing. So I really appreciate that. My question, it might be a hot button question, or maybe the information's already out there. Do you have any insights into our agency's ability to prioritize our essential staff in field offices for the vaccines? And do you anticipate getting information in that regard?
I don't have any specific information, but I have a feeling Chief Cutri may, because he's unmuted himself.
Okay.
We are working with labor agency to determine whether or not we will be in one of the prioritized tiers. Certainly as community-based social service providers, the social service being that safety net, and having to work in an office, we would hope would allow us to become part of those groups. It probably won't be our call individually. It will be in connection with the governor's office and the labor agency, and we are working on that now.
Wonderful. Thanks for that update.
And Michael, Ellen, and I have discovered a way to get into a higher tier, and that's get old. So we're close. With that report, and thank you, Rob, that concludes the action or the items we have for the open session agenda. We do have a closed session item today. And to remind board members, Chief Judge Woosam sent to us earlier today, I believe, an access code to get into the closed portion of today's meeting. It will not be the same as the open portion. So what we'll do, we will recess from this open meeting, use your access code to get into the closed meeting, and then at the conclusion of the closed meeting, for anyone who's watching, we will come back to open session, not for any additional business, but just to report out if there had been any reportable action in the closed session, and then to adjourn. So with that, I will recess the open session and invite board members and staff where appropriate to join us back in the closed session. It's 1:35 now, let's say at 1:40. Okay, thank you all. We'll recess. Okay, we will now move back into open session. One report that we had a closed session meeting. There is no vote or action to report out of that closed session meeting. So that concludes all of the items we had on today's agenda. With that, we will adjourn. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending.